No one remembered who named the planet Rask 9. They just called it what every cadet whispered after landing the world that eats noise. Sound vanished here. Drones lost signal, even heartbeats felt too loud. The jungle didn't grow, it waited, patient as a predator's breath. Into that silence, the Galactic Survival Corps dropped 20 cadets and one rule: catch something that can kill you using nothing that can save you. By the time the sun fell, the aliens had built camps of glowing fences and humming snares, the air buzzing with plasma and confidence. And the human? He sat alone beside a fire, carving a stick, a coil of rope at his feet, the only thing moving in a forest that punished motion. When Commander Relvor gave the briefing, his voice carried across the clearing. No plasma, no drones, no tech. You will observe, evade, and contain a live predator using only primitive tools. The alien cadets exchanged smirks, their primitive tools still pulsed with faint energy, collapsible barriers, sonic fences, kinetic lures masked as tradition. Only one cadet brought nothing but what he found in the dirt. Rian Ward, the human, knelt by a fallen log, binding vines into tight braids, planting sharpened stakes, and dragging branches into the undergrowth. "Where's your equipment?" one cadet jeered. Rian didn't look up. "You're standing on it." Laughter rippled through the group, fading only when the forest around them went quiet, too quiet. Even the wind stopped moving. The dropship left. The alien teams tested their fences and snares, set up energy traps and holographic decoys. Rian pulled his rope out of his pack, held the carved stick in his hand, and cut a vine from a nearby tree. He didn't speak much. The others joked that he must be meditating, or maybe already dead inside. He smiled faintly each time. It unnerved them. He spent the afternoon collecting rope lengths from vines, cutting stakes, sharpening wood with a small blade. He tied loops at the end of the rope, braided the vine into a slip knot, wedged stakes in muddy ground. He wasn't silent because he had nothing else to do. He was listening. The forest breathed in patterns. Leaves rustled only when the larger animals shifted. He learned the sound of heavy sap dripping on plant mat. He learned how roots cracked under weight, how the vines snapped when something heavy moved across them. He made his camp minimal. No light glows beyond the fire, no humming of machines, just shadows and dark shapes. The others looked at him like they expected him to vanish at any moment. Later, in the dim green dusk, he discovered something. A fresh track paw prints deep in mud, long claws, a six-toed imprint, unlike any drone skimmer tire. He bent to examine them. The pattern, the spacing, they moved fast, larger than a man but slim. He sketched it in the mud with his stick. He left a small marker twig by the prints. Then he faded into deeper brush. Around midnight, the night sound changed. The crickets and insects quieted. A low hum, not mechanical, rose from deeper in the jungle. He felt it before he heard it. The earth vibrated faintly. He rose, held his stick in both hands, examined his rope coils, and slowly crawled toward the direction of the prints. Every alien camp was still glowing blue fences, soft pulses of light, sensors in trees. Rian's camp gave off only firelight. He kept to shadows. An hour passed. He felt sap on his face where he brushed past a dripping vine. His muscles ached from crawling through mud and brush, his hands raw from sharpening and tying. But he felt alert, alive. The forest seemed to accept him as part of its silence. Then, the tracker on his wrist jumped barely. He ignored it. He had no tracker to rely on. He relied on his senses. A snapping twig, a heavy footfall. He froze. The air smelled of wet stone and chlorine. The movement came fast, then slower, then gone. He waited, then the breathing. Deep, rasping. He did not move until dawn. Then when the pale light of early morning filtered through leaves, he returned to his camp and restacked his firewood. The alien teams were already gathering, fatigued, checking sensors, complaining about nothing showing, about how the beast must have slipped them. They glanced at Ryan, who climbed into his modest shelter of logs and vines, cleaned his stick, coiled his rope, wiped mud from his boots. Commander Relvor strode over. The other cadets hushed. "Cadet Ward," he said quietly. "Your perimeter's quiet." Rian nodded. "Yes, sir." Relvor glanced at his crude stakes, the braided vine, the rope coil. He frowned. I hope you're ready when it moves. Rian met his eyes. I will be. That night, the mission escalated. The Predator would strike. Everyone knew it. The camps poured energy into shields, hedges of light, traps everywhere, but none of the alien cadets soothed their nerves as well as Ryan did by drifting to sleep in his little shelter, his tools at his side. In the still darkness, something watched. And the world that eats noise listened. By the second day, Rask-9 had shown its teeth, but not yet its full jaw. The alien cadets clustered at their camps, reviewing the flickering data their primitive systems spat out. Glitching spectrographs, corrupted bio-readouts, motion blur too fast for high-speed capture. The Predator had passed through Sector 6 in the night. A gravitic snare had triggered, then disarmed itself. The trap's weight sensors showed nothing. No caught prey. No dropped fur or skin fragments. Nothing. Just a slightly concave pressure plate, as if something huge had stepped on it, and then left without touching anything else. Ryan Ward was already awake, covered in soil and bark dust, dragging a curved log down a slope, panting hard. Sweat darkened his collar. His arms were streaked with mud, a fresh blister on his palm. He'd found a hollowed root system and had dug out its center, now working it into an angled chute. Keseth, a violet-scaled cadet from Orvat Prime, perched on a tree limb above. You're shaping that log like you think the Predator's gonna sled into it. Rian squinted up at him. Not a sled. A lever. Laughter echoed through the camp. Gonna poke it with a stick too? What's next? Fire a warning shot from a slingshot. Hey Rian, want us to build you a drum to scare it off? Even Relvor muttered under his breath as he passed. That's not fieldcraft. That's cave art. But Ryan ignored them. The angles mattered. The rope tension had to release after the weight passed a certain point. He used the stick to wedge the base of the log, added vine bindings like a giant bowstring. He hadn't slept properly. His back ached. When he lifted the last rock to weight the counterbalance, he felt something pull painfully in his right shoulder. He winced, took a breath, rotated the joint. It would bruise deep, maybe strain the muscle, but nothing torn. Not yet. The jungle heat pressed down. Insects swarmed. Rian bled in 3 places where bark had sliced his knuckles. He didn't bandage them. Not yet. The scent might help. Keseth descended and wandered over, more curious than mocking now. Why do all that work for a trap that might not trigger? Rian stood up straight, groaning faintly. Because if it does trigger, I need it to end the fight the first time. We don't get second rounds with something that tears through plasma. Keseth glanced sideways. The snares didn't work. Neither did your vine line. Why keep weaving? Ryan picked up the broken vine coil, nodded toward the shredded end. That's not failure, that's feedback. He returned to camp and boiled sap in a carved-out stone depression. It thickened into glue. He used it to reinforce the fibers of his next rope. Stronger, less brittle, slower to dry. The other cadets ate rations in sterilized silence. Rian chewed dried root he'd boiled the day before. It wasn't tasty, but it kept his hands free. He needed them. That night, the Predator struck again. It didn't charge this time. It moved. A blur between trees. A whisper of leaves. One of the sensor fences blinked, then failed. No sound, no impact, just a smear of light and then static. A scream followed short, sharp, and cut off. The cadets froze. Every head turned. The jungle stared back. A blue-furred cadet named Stren was missing. The trap he'd built was still armed. The gravitic lures still pulsed. But the Predator hadn't triggered anything. It had learned, adapted, again. Commander Relvor shouted, "Fall back, regroup at Central Camp." Energy weapons were drawn but not fired, restricted permission rules. Cadets ran through brush, dodging branches and roots. Every system they'd built, every trap powered by tech, was being bypassed. Ryan, alone in the dark, didn't run. He slid backward into his trench. Just a shallow dip in the ground, lined with sticks, mud, and a rope strung across a carved notch between 2 trees. He waited. The noise came this time, not from the Predator, from the others. Shouts, rustling. The telltale crackle of a power cell overloading. A detonation too far to be useful. Screams again. But then, nothing. Rian closed his eyes, inhaled deeply. The air had changed. The predator was close. A shift in humidity, the smell of bark sap disturbed, the faintest vibration under his left elbow. He opened his eyes, waited 1 heartbeat, 2, 3. A branch creaked behind him. He snapped his left hand down, yanking a looped vine taut. Something triggered. The branch overhead bent violently. A log dropped not on the creature, but beside it, forcing it sideways into the open. Then came the second rope. The creature's foot caught the line. It snarled, but the weight activated a pulley hidden in the undergrowth. A snapped vine countered the pressure, and the beast's own momentum lifted its front legs clear off the ground. Its roar was choked by a flailing lash of tension that caught it around the midsection. The trap didn't hold. It wasn't meant to. Rian rolled sideways just as the predator lunged. It missed him by inches. 1 claw raked his upper thigh. He gasped, dropped his stick, scrambled behind the second log. The creature charged. He barely made it over the second trap line before it did. That one worked. A spring-snapped lever fired upward, slamming a rock plate into the creature's ribcage. It flipped sideways, disoriented. Rian limped back to the rope tree, fingers blood-slicked, and yanked hard. A cascade of tension released. Vines slithered through loops, logs dropped. The beast's rear legs slipped into a snare. Weight cinched upward. The forest went still. The predator hung upside down, hissing, twisting, suspended 10 feet off the ground. Its claws slashed the air, missing. Its strength only pulled the ropes tighter. Every twist it made locked the bindings further. It stopped moving after 20 seconds. Breathing, watching. Rian collapsed to his knees, panting. Blood ran from his thigh. The cut was deep. He pressed cloth into it, grimaced hard. Not arterial, but deep enough to sting. He'd need to flush it. Maybe suture if it split. He felt lightheaded. He heard voices, shouts, the cadets. They crashed through the brush, faces pale, Relvor at the front. They stopped short at the clearing's edge. The predator hung from the trees, bound, alive. Rian sat at its base, sweat-drenched and bleeding, tightening a knot with shaking hands. Relvor stared. "You caught it?" he whispered. Rian nodded once. Another cadet, Dor, stammered. "Alive?" Rian coughed, wiped his mouth. "You said contain, not kill." Keseth approached slowly, stunned. How did you even know where it would be?" Rian didn't look up, just said, "You don't know, you listen. Every hunter hesitates before it lunges. That's where you dig the pit." He leaned back against the tree. The adrenaline was fading. His leg burned. The bleeding was slowing, but it throbbed with a deep ache now. He'd need help walking. The cloth was soaked. Relvor stepped closer, looked up at the trap, looked down at the mud, the stakes, the braidwork. This is fieldcraft," he said quietly. "You built this from nothing?" Rian exhaled hard. "Not nothing," he murmured, "just what the planet gave me." And then, almost inaudible. And what it tried to take, Rian didn't make it back to camp on his own feet. By the time the others absorbed what they were seeing, an apex predator, restrained by loops of vine and deadwood, his leg had gone from sharp ache to a dull, pulsing throb that radiated up his side. Blood loss wasn't critical yet, but it wasn't far off. He'd wrapped the wound with one of his clean undershirts and tied it tight below the cut to reduce blood flow. Still, when Relvor barked orders and Dor and Keseth moved to help, he waved a hand weakly. "Not the trap," he said through gritted teeth. "Touch that wrong and it'll snap your arms off." They listened. Every knot, every counterweight, every levered log was still under tension. Rian had built it like a muscle, one misplaced tug, and the whole thing would contract violently. Relvor examined the bindings, his fingers hovering. "The rope, it's not rope. Woven vine and bark fiber." "Sap cured," Rian murmured, swaying as he tried to stand. "Stretches just enough to hold without snapping." The commander whistled low. He'd once led containment teams against sand serpents on the dunes of Orvas. He'd seen techless traps. But nothing like this. Nothing so deceptively simple. The cadets carried Rian between them, careful not to jostle his leg. He hissed once when the slope pitched, but otherwise stayed quiet. His face had gone pale, lips dry, breath shallow. Back at camp, their field medic, a long-necked cadet from Delta Cara named Vriss, immediately cleared a space under the medical tarp. No one joked now. Not even Kesseth, who'd once called Rian's rope cosplay twine. The wound was 6 inches long, an open gash along the outer thigh, deep enough to see the fascia. Muscle damage was likely, maybe even partial tearing. No foreign object, no venom trace, though it bled heavily. "I need a scanner," Vriss said, shaking her head, "but that's restricted under mission rules." Relvor overrode it. Cadet Ward contained the objective. The rule no longer applies. Scan him. Vriss activated the handheld. Readouts flickered. Muscle layer's been sliced. No arterial damage, but his quadriceps is torn about a third through. He's got a mild concussion too, blood pressure's dropping. He's in early hypovolemic response. "Will he lose the leg?" Relvor asked. "No," Rian muttered from the cot. "But I won't be sprinting next week." Briz flushed the wound with antiseptic, injected a local anesthetic, and started to close the deeper layers with auto sutures. Rian barely moved, but sweat poured down his face. Every time she passed the needle through, his hand clenched the cot hard. "It'll need 2 weeks minimum for mobility, 4 for full load bearing," she said. "Longer if infection sets in." "No infection," Ryan said quietly. "I cleaned it before the trap triggered." Vriss blinked. "You cleaned the wound while the predator was still breathing on your neck?" He didn't answer. The predator still hung where it had been snared. It had stopped thrashing, watching instead. When cadets approached with caution to scan and record it, it didn't roar or lash out. It just stared into the jungle, muscles tight but not struggling. "They're smart," Rian said later from his cot, sipping water slowly. "They don't waste energy once they know it won't work." Relvor stood nearby, arms crossed. That trap, every knot tightened with movement. That wasn't just brute force, that was design. Ryan shifted, wincing. "Yeah, like a spider web. You catch things when they try to leave." The debrief began hours later. Rian had been moved under a shaded canopy, leg elevated, an IV drip in his arm. He'd refused strong painkillers, makes you sloppy, he'd said, but accepted fluid resuscitation and local anesthetics. The other cadets formed a circle around the projection table. Overhead, a live scan of the trapped predator rotated slowly. The creature's anatomy was terrifying. Long spine, overlapping plates of chitin, forelimbs with double joint flexibility, teeth like obsidian shards. "Class 4 predator," Relvor said. "Outpaced every containment system except this one." He tapped a holo node. Footage played, the snare triggering, the log slamming into the creature's flank, the leg rope snapping upward, the full suspension. Then came the kicker. "Heart rate," Relvor said. Numbers appeared. The predator's vitals were steady, slower than expected, calmer. "It's sedated," said Vriss, confused. "Not chemically," Relvor replied. The bindings hit 3 pressure clusters: lateral spine, rear tendon cluster, lower thoracic plate. Rian cleared his throat. "Pressure points. You restrict the blood flow and muscle contraction. Learned it from snakes." Kesseth looked over. "You learned it? How?" "Worked wildlife rescue in Sumatra," Ryan said, shifting on the cot. "Mostly pythons and cats. If you wrap too loose, they escape. Too tight, they die. But just right, and their bodies slow down to save energy." Relvor stared at him. "You built this without diagrams." "I used what I had." Ryan gestured to his arm. "If I'd had better tools, I'd have used them. But that's not what the mission asked." Silence followed. One by one, cadets realized their own traps buzzing, flickering, powered by tech they hadn't even understood, had all failed. But rope, vine, wood, tension had not. Rian lay back. His leg was stiff now. His body ached. But his mind was quiet. For the first time since arrival, he felt the planet wasn't trying to kill him anymore, just watching. As night fell again, the jungle made its soft sounds, the creak of bark, the sigh of warm air through canopy leaves. The predator still hung, suspended, gently swaying. It was no longer resisting. The cadets dispersed to their shelters, more somber than before. No laughter, no jokes. Relvor remained by Rian's side. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, softly, everything in that trap, the tension, the placement, it wasn't random. That was architecture. You used terrain slope, gravity, moisture content in the rope. Yeah, Ryan said sleepily, it's all connected. Relvor leaned forward. You didn't conquer this place. Rian turned his head slightly. Didn't try to. You let it teach you. He didn't respond. He was already asleep. Breath slow, face calm, one hand resting over the bandaged thigh that would take a month to heal. 3 days passed before Ryan could stand without bracing himself. The med tent remained cool thanks to a powered shade net, the only concession to technology the instructors allowed post-containment. His thigh was stiff, swollen around the sutures, and purpled with bruising that stretched from hip to knee. Vries inspected the injury twice a day, checking for heat or signs of infection. You've got a stable hematoma, she said on the morning of day 4, wrapping the limb in a fresh compression sleeve. No nerve damage. Lucky. Not luck, Ryan replied, gripping the support bar to shift his weight. Position of the cut. Missed the lateral femoral artery by 2 inches. Claw entry came from the side. Which you anticipated, Vris muttered. That trap you built didn't just catch it, it made it angry enough to aim right where you'd be hardest to kill. Better limping than dead. Across the camp, the predator still hung sedated now via periodic nerve stim pulses that mimicked the pressure of the original snare. It had grown quieter, less reactive, though no less alert. Its eyes tracked movement. Its nostrils flared when cadets approached too close. But it didn't thrash. It didn't test the bindings anymore. They learn fast, Kesseth said one afternoon, standing beside Ryan, who now used a carved crutch to hobble short distances. But not as fast as you. I'm not faster, Ryan said, just slower in the right ways. The cadets had dismantled their energy traps after the debrief. With the predator contained, their assignments had shifted. Analyze, document, learn. And most of them, now acutely aware of the futility of their gadgetry, came to watch Ryan instead. He explained his methods reluctantly, only when asked. Not because he guarded secrets, but because he didn't see anything special in what he'd done. You don't design a trap, he told a group of 5 who followed him to the shallow trench he'd dug earlier. You borrow it. From gravity, from friction, from how the creature moves when it thinks no one's watching. He knelt slowly, grunting as his leg resisted, and pointed to a bent sapling lashed with tension. This isn't a snare, it's a negotiation. The cadets blinked at him. You want it to move a certain way. You offer it a path. It takes it, thinking it chose, but you pick the options. One of the cadets, Yulo, a tall insectoid with segmented limbs, tilted his head. But our technology calculates that. Rian looked up at him. Then why did it fail? No one answered. That evening, a new issue emerged. The creature's vitals began to climb. Its pulse quickened, breathing deepened. The nerve stim sedative was losing efficacy. We can't hold it in that trap forever, Vris warned. Its biology's compensating, pain thresholds rising. We need to secure it in transit before extraction arrives, Relvor said. Containment pod's still locked down, a cadet called. The AI won't allow approach while the creature's active. Relvor paced. We can't sedate it chemically, mission rules. No invasive measures. What do we have? Every cadet looked at each other. Then one looked at Ryan. He was sitting near the fire, leg propped, quietly twisting a new vine into a double braid. Relvor approached. You said your trap restricted blood flow to sedate it. Can you recreate that, in a pod? Ryan didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire for a long breath. Yes, he said finally, but not with metal. Why not? Metal's too rigid. It fights back when the creature shifts. The bindings need to flex, adjust to the movement, like ligaments. You want to build a second containment, Relvor said, incredulous. Ryan nodded. Not a cage, a cradle. He spent the night drawing it in the dirt with his stick, concentric loops of fiber webbing, space to apply even pressure along the back, legs, and lower spine. Counter-tension in the corners to mimic natural branch flexibility. It would sway slightly, enough to mimic the original snare's movement. Kesseth volunteered to help gather materials. Others followed. For the first time since landing, the cadets worked without plasma cutters or survey drones. They stripped vines, soaked them in water, bent wood over steam pits to curve it. They braided until their hands cramped. Rian directed from his seated position, grimacing often. The wound ached. He took an oral analgesic finally, just enough to dull the edge. His body demanded rest. He refused it. On the second night, they began assembly. By the third, the harness cradle was done. The cadets, some skeptics still, others now cautious admirers, lowered the Predator gently from its snare, using a system of woven pulleys. Rian oversaw the transition. "Start with the rear legs," he said. 2 loops, then the thoracic wrap. The creature snarled, once an echoing growl that chilled everyone, but didn't resist. It slid into the cradle with slow, muscled tension. The vines flexed, pressure balanced, its breathing slowed. Relvor stood at the edge of the clearing, arms crossed, watching the Predator rest in a structure made entirely of materials it once used for hunting. "From nothing," he murmured again. "You built this from nothing." Rian didn't respond right away. His head hung slightly, sweat dotting his brow. Then he said, "Not nothing, just what the jungle gave me." And then, after a pause, "And what it would have used to bury me." That night, the jungle made its sounds again. The cadets sat in silence. Not out of fear, but respect. For the trap, for the hunter, and for the human who'd stopped both. By the 7th day on Rask 9, the extraction ships broke through the cloud veil just after dawn, their silver bellies reflecting jungle mist. Cadets gathered at the clearing edge, watching the shuttles lower themselves into place like birds of prey reluctant to land. For a world that devoured signal, even their comms crackled and bled static. Relvor signaled for the containment cradle to be moved. The Predator, nestled in its web of vines and tension-balanced timber, shifted but did not resist. Sensors confirmed its vitals remained stable, not unconscious, but calm. It had stopped reacting to movement, stopped snarling. Even its eye flicks had slowed. "Every time it tries to lunge," Vriss said, studying the readouts, "the tension distributes the force back into its own body, like an echo chamber." Rian stood nearby, leaning hard on his crutch. He hadn't needed full support the day before, but overnight his thigh had stiffened. He wore a compression wrap, laced with cooling gel, and still moved like a man walking on cracked ice. But he moved. When they began lifting the cradle using manual winches, he stepped forward. Relvor blocked him gently. "You don't have to guide it." "I know," Rian said, "but it needs to see me." The commander studied him, then nodded once and stepped aside. The cradle rose smoothly, vines creaking, knots tightening with every centimeter. The Predator twitched once more, reflex then resistance, and then settled. Rian met its gaze. It didn't blink. "You're not mine," he said softly, "but you're not theirs either." Behind him, cadets packed up the remnants of their camps. The glowing fences and gravitic snares had already been disassembled, the chemical lures incinerated. All that remained of the alien ingenuity were footprints and empty batteries. But one structure remained untouched: the original trap. No one had dared dismantle it. The angles felt sacred now, the way the rope had frayed under tension, the exact positioning of the stakes, even the mud stained by the Predator's body, none of it had been moved. It stood like a monument. That afternoon, the final debrief took place aboard the orbital carrier. Rian sat with his leg elevated, hydration IV in his arm, staring at the wraparound display that showed Rask 9's surface spinning slowly beneath them. The cadets filed in one by one, quieter than any previous rotation. Relvor entered last. He stood in front of them without fanfare. "No one died," he began. "That's not common." A few glances passed among the cadets. 6 of our systems failed. 4 did not even register a creature passed through. 1 detonated early and would have injured a cadet if not for its misfire. Only 1 trap functioned. And not just functioned, it adapted, held, sedated, and allowed recovery. He turned slightly. "Cadet Ward." Rian raised his head. "Sir." Relvor lifted a data node. "We reviewed every fiber, every knot. Your structure was not accidental. Your materials followed specific load ratios. You accounted for strain on multiple axes." "How?" I didn't want to die, Rian said plainly. And I didn't trust things I couldn't fix with my hands. Relvor looked around. Anyone want to explain how someone with no sensors outperforms 6 teams of engineering school valedictorians? No one spoke. Finally, Keseth raised a hand. He listened better. Listened? Relvor echoed. Not just to the forest, Keseth continued, glancing at Rian. He listened to us too. Every time we talked about what failed, what triggered early, what sensors picked up, he was paying attention. We mocked him, and he used that to refine the trap. He made us part of the net without telling us. Ryan didn't argue. Relvor placed the node down. This is the purpose of the field trial, not just to see if your designs work, but to see if you do. He paced once. Every civilization represented here has tech that outpaces death. But survival? That's a different science. The cadets were silent. Relvor turned back to Rian. You didn't just survive Rask 9, you understood it. And when you left, it didn't hate you for it. After the debrief, the cadets were allowed a few hours of free time in orbital orbit. Some retreated to bunks, some watched the Predator being transferred to deep containment. A few returned to old footage of their traps, trying to understand what they'd missed. Rian didn't rest. He stood in the observation dome, cane braced under his arm, watching the jungle swirl in green waves beneath the ship. His leg throbbed a deep, pulsing ache that reminded him with every breath he wasn't whole yet. Wouldn't be for weeks, maybe longer. But he had time. Relvor approached again, standing beside him. You could have died. I still might, Rian said. Torn quad can clot wrong, infection could set in. I've had worse, but not on a jungle moon. Why not use more of the tools? You could have borrowed systems. No one would have blamed you. I didn't come to show I could survive with nothing, Rian said. I came to see if I could survive with only what I understood. Relvor tilted his head. And? Rian's eyes stayed on the spinning world below. Turns out, that's enough. The commander nodded once and left him to the view. In the days that followed, Ryan underwent daily evaluations. The muscle injury remained stable, healing in line with expectations. No infection, sutures held. He was cleared to move without crutches by day 20. Full activity would take longer, but that didn't matter. The story had already spread. Other instructors requested footage. Other cadets sent messages. One even asked for a diagram of, that rope harness you used to wrap its legs, was that a triple tension lark's head, or something new? Rian never answered those requests directly. He didn't mind teaching, but diagrams missed the point. The jungle didn't follow instructions. It demanded humility. Rask 9 receded behind the ship. The world that ate noise faded into darkness. The cradle had worked. The Predator lived. So did they. And the trap, crude, brutal, beautiful, remained in the forest, vines slowly reclaiming it. A part of the jungle again. A story, not a schematic. The others had come to tame a wild world. Rian had let it teach him.